showing these bitches how to do it. Self-respect, I ain't hot, so then prove it. Believe it or not, swag is Ripley. Rock a skirt, long stock like Pippi. Wish that upon me like 50. Who is fucking with me? Language explicit but terrific. Ready for the war, built so frigid. Not the devil, but I'm burning spirits. Do it for the heavens in the sky like the bishop. If you don't like my critic, don't fuck with it. Cause I put an end to your shit in a minute on a snippet. You niggas can't fuck with me, admit it. You could be the past, prehistoric and exhibits. Sorry to offend you, but don't fuck with hypocrite shit. Candy Sandy killing all these bitches on your hit list. I don't deal with trash, I don't work for sanitation. I spit fire so I cause evacuations. Did you really think that you could make me run full? Welcome to my class, got a lot to learn school. I am what it is, what it is, what it do. I am on top of this shit. Did you really think that you could make me run full? Welcome to my class, got a lot to learn school. I am what it is, what it is, what it do. I am on top of this shit.
Asians who seek a righteous place and position in our country are permitted that. Now let me say something else before I end. There's a lot of tension between Africans from America and Caribbeans and Africans from the continent and from their country. And be real with it now. Some of that is our fault on this side. Like we got the ability to condescend and talk about them when them is us, right? And on the flip side, we got some brothers and sisters coming in who, because they were raised in an all-black country, say, why you people always talking about racism? Well, you are taking advantage of our arguments for the last 400 years to have your black mouth heard and your black body respected. So on both sides, we got to acknowledge the internecine squabbling going on. We, at the end of the day, they shooting after Louima and George Floyd. Understand that we in the same boat together.
Wrapped around the issue. Now, you know, some people come up to me sometime, and I'm sure they come to these distinguished gentlemen, Leagues. That must be Bill Jones' nephew or something. Dr. Williams, you know, with that fancy and prophetic language. Say, why you be using the big words? I'm using big words that you don't understand sometimes because people got big problems with you. And I know the language they talking about, right? Recidivism, as Dr. William Augustus Jones said, a return in degree to a former state of being. That's what he said. You gotta break that down. That's what recidivism means. Oh, I thought that was the third horse in the, okay. Right? So, black in public as a witness to traditions of Howard, of critical thought, of A. Philip Randolph, of W.E.B. Du Bois, of Rayford Logan, of Anna Julia Cooper. We are bringing to bear serious thought on social issues. And the masses of black people, I know there's a real push against top-down, I get it. Speak from the bottom up, I understand it. You can't speak for another person. Say, who are you speaking for? People who think I'm speaking for them? That's what I'm talking about. If you don't find yourself in that number, don't sweat. Keith, I'm good. If you don't think I'm speaking for you, no worries. But for those who find in these men's voices and many women's voices, the amplification of their intuition, filled in the blanks, a good public intellectual takes what you intuited and gives empirical evidence to substantiate claims made in independent thought and assessment. Because to be a black public intellectual is to piss black people off sometimes. Right? Call out the homophobia, the transphobia, call out the anti-dark-skinned black peopleism, if that's the thing. I think it is. The anti-blackness runs deep. So, in our culture and community. So for me, a black public intellectual is an intellectual who is public about his or her craft and speaks about blackness in complicated and nuanced fashion so that people who are invested in that thought will derive from it better insight about the issues they confront. You ain't got to agree, but look, I used to work on the line, wasn't no summer job. Cleaner and degreaser, and then I was welding, balancing those wheel brake drums, right? Everybody ain't doing everything. Somebody on the windows, somebody on the doors, somebody dealing with the wheel brakes. So there's a division of labor. So if I'm working all day reading books, I better know some stuff. And I should be able to help you out with some stuff you don't quite understand. Not that you ain't smart, that's just my job.
That's right.
And there are a lot of smart people who don't do this professionally. And so we listen to them and amplify what they say. I listen to people. I was talking to a woman I called up the other day about something was wrong with my account. On American Express, it looked like somebody was trying to rip me off, but it turned out to be me. But what's interesting, but the woman was dropping mad science about the Oscars. Now I'm trying to rip that off. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna cite you. You know what black preachers do the first time? As Dr. Williams says. Second time, as somebody said. Third time, like I always say. So she was dropping like mad science about black relationality and accountability to your partner. I'm gonna fix that up, put some words on it, and it's gonna sound smart. The point is, as I end, to be a black public intellectual is a choice, it's an honor, it's a responsibility, and it's something we take seriously. That's why I write books like Negroes Write Hooks. Because I want to make the life of the mind sexy to young people like they're looking at Jay, like they're looking at Beyonce. I want to make the life of the mind sexy so they want to use words. Like I was influenced by public intellectuals when I was coming along who were lawyers and doctors that made me want to do what I do. So in my mind, that's what I wrote.
And Dr. Garcia, as a follow-up, and then we'll work our way. I mean, I think when I look at your work, you have been accessible. You've made your work accessible, really, to the public, so that you obviously are studied by scholars and intellectuals, but people who may not have had access to higher ed are still reading your books, and I think that's a credit. Can you talk a little bit about the need, though, for intellectuals to make their work more accessible to the public?
Right. Some of your work needs to be accessible. Some of it you gotta get tenure. So you better write some stuff your mama ain't gonna never understand. The insurrection of subjugated knowledges and the descent of sentential rationality. So you can get a job. Once you get that job, hell to the no! But get your tenure up first. Right? So everything I write ain't accessible, but a lot of what I do is. Now, don't act like other scholars ain't hating on us for doing that. See, that's the side they don't never tell you when you won't be a book, right? Oh my God, it's not really rigorous. These are Negroes now. Doesn't quite pass the test of legitimate adjudication of competing claims made in the realm of rationality with empirical evidence. Think it, please. I know what I'm saying. So the thing is that Jesse Jackson said to me, if you say something I can't understand, that's a failure of your education, not mine. And let me tell you something else. When you really know your stuff, you can be lucid like Baldwin. Amen. When you don't know and you're trying to fool around, now there's room for that. I create justification for private intellectuals. Everybody ain't public. Everybody can't be on TV. But like Tupac said, I might not change the world, but I'll be damned if I won't spark the brain that will. So now, I can take some stuff written by people in gobbledygook and can't understand and obscure this language because that's what I do, but I can translate it.
Right now.
Now, they look down on that skill because they want to beat you. They see you on TV, my God, I'm not sure if you appear on television that you have the requisite analytical skills to deconstruct and demythologize conceptions that need clarification. All right, cool. I got you. I know how to do that. Read my book over the mic. All right. Read the last book. book that I got on Derrida. What's Derrida got to do with Jesus? And I was talking about ontological obfuscation in the midst of a kind of soteriology that was in quest of a grounded empirical quest for truth.
Say that.
I can do that. But I ain't got no PhD to impress other scholars because I was old, 21 before I went to college. I was a teen father hustling on the streets of Detroit, lived on welfare, didn't go to college until I was 21. So when I got a PhD, I was clear about what I was doing it for. So for me, I respect the broad range of rhetorics, verbal inventiveness, skills that are deployed in very minute ways. You go to your doctor, you ain't trying to, you don't care if your doctor can't explain to the world what's going on, just fix what's wrong with me. You can speak all that language. Your latissimus dorsi ran into your pectoralis major, and now you have a, all right, cool, can you help me out? Right? When you go to your lawyer on that weed case, on a case to help you out, you don't know what habeas corpus means and all these Latin words, but that's all right. Do you know what they mean? And can you hook a black man up or a woman up? So, let's not pretend that speaking clearly and lucidly doesn't have its price. Now, I'm a full professor. I'm a distinguished university professor. I can teach any department I want to. I teach 2 classes a year. They love the fact that I be writing stuff for the masses because they get fame off my name. It's an exchange value. So I'm down with that. But when you look at a Dr. Watson, who writes brilliantly for diverse education, other places where he's explaining stuff, and Drs. Jones and Williams, that stuff is important because you got to master it in order to make it clear. Amen. In order to tell somebody what it is. But let's not pretend that other scholars don't be looking down their noses at you, thinking they smarter than you until they see you on a panel and then you whip their butt. And they're like, oh, I guess he does possess the kind of skills. Oh yeah, bro, I can do it like you want to do it. I can do it with filet mignon, or we can do it with chitlins. You just tell me what your preference is. So that's why it's extremely important to do.
Dr. Williams, you want to come?
How are you supposed to follow that? I would say, just very quickly, because I think Dr. Dyson speaks to this beautifully, a lot of us, particularly who are children of the civil rights and black power movements, grew up in community centers where history and scholarship were just part of the organic framework of the communities we grew up in. I grew up in Bridgeport, Connecticut. We had a cultural arts center that was formed after a young boy named Gary Crooks died, drowned in a uncontained sewage treatment facility. And people in the community rallied and protested, and what they asked for in that moment was a community center to provide recreational space for black youth. And what filled that void wasn't just that recreational space. They didn't build a basketball court and walk away. They built music rooms, they built art rooms, and for 9 years my father taught music in that space. And at night, when the music and art classes ended, we had African guides where we learned a little Kiswahili and a little bit of African American history, and we read Baldwin, and we were introduced to Audre Lorde. And then people asked the question, well, how did you end up becoming a PhD, and why were you interested in it? In the same way that Dr. Dyson said that they sparked the beauty of the mind in a way that it became sexy. And I said, not only can I do that, I want to do that. It was like Sesame Street meets Black Power. That's when you take politics and you wed them to community in a way that empowers young people to see and believe that they can make a difference. I'll only add that in the conversation about defund the police last year, I had to keep reminding people they had no problem defunding the arts. The Art Center went away in 1986. So those community spaces that existed, we have a responsibility as public intellectuals to continue to try to create that in any way that we can so that Sesame Street continues to meet Black Power.
Just a footnote to this completely correct exposition, and that is social media works. Get these ideas out here, get them in a quip. Get your followers, make sure people know what's going on, and you have this going on. I think about one of my favorite new public intellectuals, Dean Rashad, Felicia Rashad, down at Howard. She tweeted out what the white Pennsylvania Supreme Court understood about her co-star. Forget about whatever you think that Bill Cosby did in the past. That's right. That man never should have been on trial. That's why the white Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned all of that. And Dean Rashad comes out on Twitter. These are the people who gave us a different world, that helped to reestablish the centrality of historically black colleges and universities, which were folding in the mid-80s. They were devoted. This is Howard University, which is supposed to have people who can speak out. And the minute that she agreed with basic, what we would call black letter law on just procedure, she gets shot down. But what was important was, all is not lost, because the usage of social media helped to empower men and women, especially black men and women all over the world, to understand that there is another view about the way mass incarceration works at the high end, as opposed to just what we think of as the low end. And Dean Rashad did that for us using social media. So I would just say that these expressions and things have a new voice and a new opportunity and avenue in Twitter and Instagram and you name it, TikTok. And our scholars are using these to great effect.
I'm wondering, after the killing of George Floyd, we saw, of course, all of these institutions putting out statements claiming that they were going to do better. And yet, when we look at universities, colleges and universities in this country, particularly predominantly white institutions, there is a problem with recruiting and retaining black faculty, right? They say they can't find them. This is a problem. So can you all talk to that issue of how do we diversify PWIs as well, not just HBCUs?
Quickly, the first step would be to make sure that the black faculty, which many of whom in the first generation and wave of black faculty at PWIs owed their positions to black power movements and student movements, that the black professors do their job, because they're the ones who sit on the recruitment committee. I always say beware the faculty where there's one black person who's been on that faculty alone for years and they're always complaining about a lack of diversity. If you haven't been able to do your diplomacy and make the white people hire your black colleagues and friends from across the country, then I think you're trying to do job security. So what I do is to file suit, because I'm a lawyer and these people come to me. By the time you get to my office, and I've sued at least 15 colleges and universities for racism, black people without tenure and everything else, but by the time you get to my office, it's so bad. Because we all know, if you've ever been to court and it was a good experience, raise your hand. Courts don't work that well. And so by the time you decide you're going to push back in court over these unequal employment opportunities, if you will, it's very, very bad. But the good thing is, there's a lot of information that comes out of these suits. So you have to be prepared, on number one, on the front end, to make sure that your African Americans are doing what they're supposed to do in these positions where they largely got them because they were black, whether they're qualified or not, because they didn't want us there. And number two, that you're pushing back all the time and making sure that the faculty who make these decisions know that there are going to be consequences, like there were with Nicole Hannah-Jones. And that was largely a loudmouth student movement and media that made Chapel Hill do the right thing, and I'm glad she went the other way to Howard over that. It needs to happen more, because that story was not unusual, especially in that state. So this is part of the challenge, to embolden and empower in a universe where these professors come in with $200,000 in student loans they have to pay back. They come in with extremely high healthcare costs on so-called affordable exchanges that are not affordable. So by the time you have 2 or 3 kids, the economic reality is you can't afford to speak up. You've been economically neutralized. And that's part of the reason well, we can't find a black male. 50% of law faculties in this country don't have a black male faculty after George Floyd. So we've really got to wake up and smell the coffee and push this thing. And that's why I'm for just straight affirmative action numerical goals, such as quotas, which worked in the 60s. I think there's no other way. We tried everything else. It's time to go back to those basic principles.
Dr. Williams?
I'm going to be very quick because I want to hear what Dr. Dyson has to say about this, but I'll say one thing. Decolonize the damn curriculum, period. The reason we don't we got to decolonize the academy. The academy operates on a 19th century, 18th century white supremacist model. What is taught, who teaches. So the reality is, I got a sister that's studying black feminist theory, and what role is she going to take at the university where the English department, the history department, the American studies department all reify white supremacy in the curriculum they teach. The reality is we have to reimagine the university, and along with it all the 19th and 18th century colonial processes that define it. Tenure, right? Folks should be able to come in and do community engaged scholarship from moment one. That's relevant to the people in the community that you claim to serve. Yet we bring people in and haze them. So they go through this process of satisfying 9 people who study what they study, that their work is legitimate, instead of the masses who say, hey, some of that work you're doing on housing could be really relevant right here in Cleveland, Ohio, or Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, or St. Paul, Minnesota. But we're too busy when they have that energy and that fire, channeling that in the direction of ways that are in no way productive to the larger conversations about social justice, racial justice, economic equality, gender equality, and all the ways that Professor Dyson talked about it. So 2 words, 3, decolonize the curriculum, decolonize the academy, and we'd be in a better space to talk about that in a meaningful way.
Man, that's just great stuff from them. I just say amen. And, you know, you can't find none. They hide from the police like everybody else. Right? They living their lives like everybody else. Can't find none. Ain't that something? I guess out of the 100 and some men who have been Supreme Court judges, you couldn't find no qualified black person. Now look how that slips. Do it the way they say they want it to be done. Right? Go to Harvard, not once, but twice. Y'all said that was the school. We like Howard, but y'all said Harvard was cool. We going by what y'all say is good. Then they got mad. Well, we can't say she's qualified because she's clearly qualified. But now we got to jump on, oh, she's a pedophile. Now you know better than that. You know they desperate when they trying to, what she did was in the mainstream for jurists, according to jurisprudential rationality, right? She in the mainstream. And they quote this stuff for you because they trying to find a reason not to see that you qualify. So the thing is that it's a bunch of qualified people if you look at the right place. Look, they just celebrated the 75th anniversary of the NBA. Look at what affirmative action did for them. You telling me that Michael Jordan, because he's a beneficiary of affirmative action, is not as qualified as Bob Cousy? They say he the GOAT. He at least in the top 2 or 3. Kobe, Jordan, maybe LeBron, Kareem,
Bill Russell.
Bill is 6 rings, 8 teams. I mean, but when you got 30 teams, I know with 8 it's really tough, but you got to go up against 29 different teams. I mean, I'm just saying. But wait a minute, are you trying to tell me that affirmative action, which ain't a shame on black people, it's a shame on white folk that y'all kept us out that long? Right? All this goodness you've been missing. You didn't want Satchmo. You didn't want Duke Ellington. Right? You didn't want Ray Charles. You didn't want Aretha Franklin? R-E-S-P-E-C-T. She giving spelling lessons to these people out here. So the thing is that if we want to, what do we do in these PWIs? Pretty young thing. Oh, that's Michael Jackson. Predominantly white institution. I know y'all know that, but I'm going to just say it in case 2 of y'all don't know. Right? Predominantly white institutions, we got to act like we ain't grateful to be up in there. I mean, we grateful to have a job, but you ought to be grateful we bringing this Yohuru Williams and Amy Jones up in there. Right? You know, look, you pay me, pay me like you owe me. You can't pay my great-great-great-granddaddy, but you can pay me. And trust me, and trust and believe. So the thing is that in these predominantly white institutions, as Professor Watson is talking about, you know, he got a PhD. He just act like he got a PhD. And he writing books and doing his thing. Let me tell you. So what we got to do to these white institutions is hold them to account at the levels we are. And when you heard Professor Jones say, if you're the only Negro who's been up in there for 10 years, you're trying to be the only Negro. Because you don't want no competition. Because you don't want, see, when it's only one black person, that's how all black people act. Then you see another Negro, well, not all of them. See, Obama got over because he's the only one. And until there's another, we don't know what another one will do. Because he did some slick stuff now. I know y'all don't want to hear that. This ain't the audience. But that's what a black public intellectual does, pushes you. You know Obama had 3 bites at the apple, black women, of putting a black woman on the Supreme Court. Don't give me, well, he had to make the consideration. What? He put 2 women, he should have, Sotomayor, But Kagan, he could have hooked up a sister for that spot. Huh? Oh, look at y'all. Y'all like black Trumpers. Y'all black Trumpers. He's my forever president, and I will war with him on January. Okay. So that's what black public elections do. We got to push the audience, push the envelope. So for me, I think what we have to do is we have to go like I do. I just went to Vanderbilt. I was at Georgetown. I'm at Vanderbilt now. And now the dean sees me as a recruiter at large. So I be looking for Negroes, and they don't necessarily think that. I said, they good. Let me tell you why they good. Well, if you think so, Mike. Hey, Professor Dyson, if you think that they're qualified, then let me give them a second look, because you're a smart Negro. So you got to use everything at your disposal. Charm, chutzpah, coercion, cajoling, seduction. I mean, rhetorically. Me tooing me up in here now. So we have to use everything at our disposal and think about it. As I, you know, our foremothers and forefathers, I mean, they couldn't even get up in the spine. So don't you be too weary from trying to do something up in there when they couldn't even crack the nut. They got a PhD from there. E. Franklin Frazier at Harvard couldn't teach there. Right? Brother Woodson got a PhD there, couldn't teach there. Du Bois, 1935 Black Reconstruction. So he writes a massive tome, analytically sophisticated, or the Philadelphia Negro, sociologically sophisticated. Everybody ain't gonna understand it, but he wrote Souls of Black Folk. You can understand that one with that high poetry. So we challenge the white authority to do what these gentlemen have said in terms of you not being the only one, reaching out, recruiting, decolonizing, which means that even in some of our black schools, they got a white European paradigm for they studies. So you got to challenge that too. I go to some black schools, I love them, you know, but some of them want to kick me out. They will never let him come back again. Because they're conservative and reactionary. If we're going to tell the truth about it. I love them schools. All three of my kids went to black schools, and I paid for it. I'm a one-man United Negro College fund. My name is Lou Rawls. Right? Morehouse, Spelman, and Hampton. And my one son went to 5 different schools. The Negro started at Salisbury State in North Carolina, then went to Grambling, then to Morehouse, then to Morris Brown, and I begged Morehouse, if you take this Negro back in, I'll give free lectures for the next time. And then he got his degree. So my point is, even in our own black institutions, we got to push for black studies. We got to push for opening up the paradigm for us. So the reason I'm at a white school is because I'm trying to open up some space so that white kids need to have information too. This young man right here is a high school student, right? What's your name?
I'm a senior, Kevin.
Kevin. Brother Kevin. All right, he asked a hell of a question in the earlier session. We need young non-white, I don't know, are you black? I'm Iranian. Middle Eastern. All right, he ain't black, but he a brother. Look at it. I'm trying to groom that boy to be president over here, you know? So the thing is that we need to be in these spaces and places where the faces that don't look like us begin to push for policies that we need. And if you push the white student body, they put pressure on the white officials and administrators to open up space. That's how you change the BWI as well.
So before we get to the next question, of course, there is breaking news, and that is that there has been time it up for a few questions to the panelists, but I do have one last question I want to ask, and that is, we talked about the tenure process, and I'm curious, when we talk about faculty members, particularly faculty members of color, who are under assault for the work that they do, particularly around critical race theory and some of these other issues, I was wondering, how do we fight back? How do we help faculty members within the academy who are being targeted by state legislatures, governors? We see this in Texas, we see this in Florida. It's become a problem. So Professor Jones will start and we'll work our way, and then we'll take a few questions.
Yeah, and the tenure track is the whole point, if you will, of the early academic's life, at least a full-time person devoted to scholarship. And that means that you go from, for maybe 6 to 8 years, you go from an assistant professorship up to perhaps an associate professorship level, and then you get tenure, in which there's something like a property right, where you're secure, you're supposed to have processes that prevent removing you. And what we've seen, as Dr. Watson said, is that there are reactionary forces along the way from, I would say, the academic cradle on up. There are people who are writing or saying or doing things that are considered to be controversial or in this room too pro-black. You can become a target, and those processes can be thwarted. The faculty can vote you down. They can tell you to get lost a few years in. You can be voted through by the faculty. You can be denied the appointment by the senior people. One thing that Dr. Dyson has lived out, and I'm old enough to remember now, but young enough to have been inspired. I remember about 22 years ago when my friends from Kentucky were undergraduates at Vanderbilt. I'm from Kentucky. These were white folks. Dr. Dyson was offered the same professorship there, and it got up to the higher-ups, and they didn't follow through with it. And Dr. Dyson kept doing what he was doing and was at great schools, great schools anyway, but a bunch of the white students saw how wrong that was, that their own processes had not been followed, and they activated politically. And one thing that makes me very proud.
And it was an interesting moment because if you look at the crew, there are 2 women, 1 brother, Ron McNair, 1 Asian American, Ellison Okazuna, 3 white men. It's a moment of triumph, but it only can be a moment of triumph if you tell our history honestly, because 1 person on that shuttle was a descendant of slaves. 1 had dealt with Jacks, keep moving. 2 of them had dealt with gender inequality. So it can only be a moment of triumph if you tell that history honestly. But Ronald Reagan had the unenviable task that evening of facing the American people. And one of the things he told Peggy Noonan, his speechwriter, is we got to deal with the school children because they canceled classes, suspended classes. They wanted kids to watch this go up, and then a disaster happened. So Reagan gets on television that evening and he says, and I quote, "We don't hide from our history. What makes America great is that we face things in all of their complexity. We're not the Soviet Union." So what I said to the teachers in Florida, really to the school district is, we're going to read Ronald Reagan. Line by line. Because the patron saint of conservatism is the one that said, if you hide your history, he said it too. He said, young children are watching this and we can't run from it. So to those of you who say that white kids can't handle black history, oh, by the way, they watched George Floyd die a million times on YouTube. They watched Breonna Taylor. They watched Raynette Turner and Sandra Bland. They watched the cities in this country erupt in violence. Don't pretend that they're not watching and that there isn't something that we need to impart as educators to them. And as a corollary to that, just to wrap the whole thing up, I also had to remind the teachers that they exist. We're afraid. I said, you should be. You should be. But I think about my sister Duchess Harris at McAllister, some of these sisters that are doing scholarship that we should elevate because they take the brunt of this attack in a way that, quite frankly, we could spend an entire day just talking about the assault on black women in the academy, and we saw a piece of that in the confirmation hearings that we all experienced. Well, one of the things that blew me away in talking to Duchess Harris is that, you know, when you speak truth to power and you're in that space and you've got, you know, folks coming at you and trying to find a way to find, when you gotta make something up like critical race theory is the boogeyman, when you gotta try to turn Kimberly Crenshaw, who's a brilliant scholar, into the boogeyman, you got a problem. And for us to buy that, black folks come to me and go, do you teach that critical race theory? Wow. I said, no, I teach the other CRT, culturally relevant teaching.
He ain't just no pretty face. He's one of them. Look, how you gonna fight against the tenure thing? Lie until you get tenure. Oh, did I say that out loud? I'm so sorry. Yes, I think that these reactionary processes are appropriate. There's a guy named David Harvey. He's a Marxist geographer. But before he got tenure, and he a white man. This is what the white man did. He was just like, do geographical studies. That's what I do. He got that tenure. He came out that closet. He a left-wing Marxist informed. And they're like, how the hell did he get through? He was silent. Now, I'm being half facetious and half telling the truth. I was in a unique position. Because I got my PhD one year, the next year I was a full professor. Given the timeline Dr. Jones talked about, usually what, 15, 17 years, I did in 1 year. That cold. Right? I mean, on the surface, you can say, what led to that? I did what I did and I do what I do. I wrote a book before I got my PhD done. But I did my PhD because I didn't want my book to come out before I was Dr. Dyson. Right? So you see what I was doing. And then I wrote a book and they gave me tenure, or should I say I earned it. And then I wrote another book that was in process, and they offered me a full professorship. So I skipped assistant and associate and went straight to jail. On the full professor. That don't mean nothing to y'all. Everybody's a university professor. Everybody's a full professor. Nah, they ain't. And we can tell you what it means, right? But it means, you done done your work. And as he said, a lifetime grant, unless you mess up, that you can do what you do. So the thing is, you got to be strategic, right? I try to tell younger people, let me protect you. Let me say that, because I can afford to say that. And all they can do is roll their eyes. He's going to write another book next week, so you've got to be prepared. Because that's what I do. I punish you with that knowledge. I'm smacking you with that word. Yes, I take joy. So the thing is that I tell younger people, now there's some brave young people, I get it, you want to speak up. Be strategic. Jesus said, it is not yet my hour. You ain't going to force me to go up on the cross before me getting up on the cross going to do something redemptive. You know, Jesus without a redemptive hour is the thief on the cross next to him. Hey, let me come with you today. Jesus could have been that one. But Jesus said, let me wait for my time. Because when my time comes, then, when I know the fullness of hour, the kairos, not the chronos, you know what I'm saying? You heard Dr. Williams drop that word, reify. Ooh, that's a pretty word. Taking that which is abstract and making it concrete. The reification. Learn that word today. Repeat after me. Reify. R-E-I-F-Y. Go home and use that on your wife and her husband tonight. Baby, you trying to reify me, you might get that Will Smith treatment up there. I wasn't calling you no name, girl! That's right. Let the lights go out. Some Negro leaning against the light. Get off! They're trying to get us out of here. So I'll say this. You got to understand what you possess. And when you get where you're going and you get the kind of credentials you need, have some courage to speak up and to speak out. And to represent your people, whoever your people are, in a very powerful fashion. So in terms of these tenure battles, it's rough out here. And y'all might think, oh, they got a cushy job and stuff. There's a lot of people dogging people. You ain't ready. Your writing ain't good enough. You didn't get enough, certifications for people who looked at you teach. Because they look at your teaching, they look at your scholarship, and they look at your service. And a lot of black people do a lot of service because all students be coming to us ain't even in our classes. Hey, Dr. Williams. Hi, I'm from Bon Jovi land. And I'd like to add, and Dr. Williams, a very nice guy as he is, he talks to all of them. That ain't in the contract. That ain't what they pay you for, but you have a conscience. So you're going to speak to them. But if you spend all your time doing the service, ain't no time left to write. So I tell young scholars especially, get on your job of writing. Because when I see young students come to me, I'm going to be a social activist. I said, be a social activist. But get your degree, homie. Why are you doing that? And if it comes down to a choice, get your degree, then activate all you want. Like you got a Jerry curve. So the thing is that you got to learn to get the learning. You know, ain't but a few of us gonna get up in them spaces. We need generals and people in control and charge and people on the street stop and look. You know when people stop us and they say, keep doing what you're doing. Love what you're doing. Thank you for representing us. That is the pay we get. More than the emolument. E-M-O-L-U-M-E-N-T. Used by W.E.B. Du Bois in 1903. Go look it up. So the thing is, getting that check, getting that cash, right? More important than that is the love and support of people who feel that they identify with what you do. So in terms of real tenure stuff, be strategic. Get your writing done, then learn to be strategic about what you say, and then when you hit that mark, and they give you tenure, I'm done, I'm good, I got it. Hell yes, yes. Jesus, let me give you one point before I end. I was at Princeton, that's where I got my PhD. And I was doing summer school, right? Because we had to take 2 years before you got your master's degree. By your second year, you had to have learned French and German and passed them in order to advance. I finished them up before I went the first day in school. And they called me up, they said, Mr. Dyson, there must be a mistake. It says that you finished your French and German. I said, hell yeah, I did. But I knew French, because, you know, I was in school. Je parle un peu de français. So I did that, but I ain't know no German. Das ist verboten. Ich bin ein Berliner. I ain't know nothing about that. So I took a summer class to study French. This is German, true story. So in the class, the professor said, you know, in trying to translate this, there's only one tense that is available that will be able to sufficiently translate it. It's what is known in black English as it bees that way. Now you know I said, God damn, these Negroes had it right all along! The German professor told me that the tense could not be translated except in African American vernacular English. So what I tell people in terms of tenure, don't be trying to out-white white people. You can't out-white white people. But you can damn sure do you with perspicacity and vision and power. Because I knew I cut my lane out. I'm quoting hip-hop, Snoop Dogg, D.O.G. I was doing that like, my God, we've never heard that. And joining that to highfalutin European theory. Because that's what I do. And so they had no choice but to acknowledge what I was doing. And so I want to say to you, be strategic, get your writing done, and then have your students get in order. This is what these gentlemen have been saying, and I'll reinforce it. The students are the one with the power. Black power, insurrection led to professors being appointed in San Francisco and across the country. So folk in the street demanding our presence are the ones, so we never forget them. So politics are already involved. And let me say this as a bonus to this question on CRT. Most folk don't know the damn difference between CRT and OPP. Right? They don't know no damn difference. White folk, you ask them, I'm so sick of CRT. What is it? It's CRT. What is that, the transit, the metro? What is CRT? I don't know what it is. You don't damn know what CRT stands for. So the thing is, you understand that CRT was generated by Kimberly Crenshaw, Derek Bell, Marie Matsuda, Charles Lawrence, some professors who said the following: the justice system is not blind like it says it is. It be peeking through that darn thing on its head. And so critical race theory says, let's not look at individuals, let's look at institutions. Let's not look at sentiment, let's look at system and structure. That's common sense. You not calling me the N-word don't mean you straight in terms of race. It's about the way in which you kick my kids out of school earlier and earlier. It's how you use standardized tests against us. It's how you put us in jail for 20 years for the same white person who did something, you put them in for 5 days. That's what they were about. So every one of us up in here who got some sense are down with CRT, but I'm like this, I ain't stuck to no words. I'm stuck to, do you want the commercial or the product? I want the product. You can call it BBD, you can call it that girl is driving me. You can do whatever you want to do. Call it whatever you want to call it. In your own mind and soul and spirit, understand what it is. Defund the police. Y'all been defunding everything like Dr. Williams said. I don't care if you call it Hookie Baruki. I don't care if you call it Rafiki Wakumba. That's Swahili. Get down with it. So my point is, whatever you, whatsoever, as James Brown said, you call it, is critical, it's important, but the investment is in the process of transformation itself. We have to learn to do like these white conservatives. Lay plans 30 years ahead of time. They've been planning for this abortion. They've been planning for affirmative action. We have to lay plans for our own babies being put on the Supreme Court to join Ketanji Brown Jackson and making sure that we're up in these schools and transforming them with our knowledge. That's what we got to do.
We have time for about 3 questions. So let's try, I need you to stand up, ask your question very loudly. Again, questions, not long comments. So we'll start here. Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is yes, Hotep Peace. My name is Dashawn Farad. I'm a reporter for YourBlackWorld.com. And I would like to ask these 3 scholars, do you find that within the black community there is an extreme case of anti-intellectualism, specifically amongst activists? Because it appears that oftentimes if you have doctorate next to your name or if you have letters next to your name, people accuse you of not necessarily being down with the struggle. Have any of you experienced this?
Thank you.
Anyone want to take it? Dr. Williams?
I think yeah, definitely have experienced that. I think it's a frustration because of the nature of the academy. So as Dr. Dyson was talking about, it's difficult for people who are not in the academy to see what black faculty are doing in that space to promote justice. They're not reading those books. And so when it comes to things happening on the street, it's like, where were you? You know, and I think that comes from a place of pain. Wounds produce narratives. And so the wound that sometimes people in our community feel about the fact that that knowledge isn't accessible, that those people aren't in the spaces and the struggle with them, I think leads to that being a challenge. As to anti-intellectualism, I think I've dealt with that. I think we all have dealt with that from the very beginning. It is, you know, and Du Bois talked about it. It is very lonely to commit yourself on this path where you're saying that I'm committing myself to knowledge as a way of liberation. Because that's not going to translate itself as quickly as being able to stand before the shouting mob and be like, I'm here, right? They've both been necessary. I think Dr. Dyson spoke to that. But I think we have to find a way intentionally, as the National Action Network is doing in this space, to create opportunities for activists and intellectuals to get together and to recognize. And it happened organically here in New York. I think we'll all remember this with Occupy. So in the Occupy movement, activists and intellectuals showed up in the same space. Was like, damn, we talked about the same thing. How'd that happen? Right? We have been talking about the same thing. We don't create opportunity for us to do that. I say in conclusion to that, I like to share with people, if you don't study African American history, sometimes you'll look at the Black Lives Matter movement and you're out of the conversation. So people love Ta-Nehisi Coates and Between the World and Me. I'm like, but that's W.E.B. Du Bois, Between Me and the Other World. They in conversation. That's a 100-year-old conversation. You ain't in because you don't know the scholarship. You wear those shirts that say stay woke. Read the beginning of Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, 1952. I am invisible, understand, simply because people refuse to see me. Like the bodiless heads in those sideshows. It's like I've been surrounded by a hard, distorting glass. They see only my surroundings themselves are figments of their imagination. So I remember, awake the sleeping ones, because there's nothing as dangerous in this world as sleepwalkers. Stay woke. That's a conversation that's happening between Black Lives Matter and today, that if we're not privileging and elevating and celebrating black scholarship, we lose.
Professor Jones?
If there's what you call an anti-intellectualism on the masses, where there's a distrust of people with doctorates and these degrees and things, I would say that it is a founded distrust, because most black intellectuals are not like Dr. Michael Eric Dyson or Cornel West or Martin Luther King, who was really training to be a dean of a chapel somewhere, if you want to tell the truth about it, and got swept up by people like Rosa Parks and the local NAACP to lead the boycott, who'd been prepared by Daddy King, who was a race man in his own right. But the fact of the matter is, it's founded. So the burden is back on us to rise to the level of where we are entitled to attract the respect and the trust of these people. I don't blame them, because what they're looking at is a series of people who are largely impotent, present company excluded, obviously. That's why we're at NAN. I went to Emory when we brought Reverend Sharpton, because there was blackface in the yearbook and a bunch of other racist stuff when I was a senior, and only the Middle Eastern Studies program with people like Deborah Lipstadt came against that. The black professors were scared to death, and they have the best black students. Well, no wonder we don't have any confidence. And we didn't have Dr. Dyson or Cornell or the 4 or 5 or the Kimberly Crenshaws who are really doing it. So yeah, I think that there's a distrust. I think it's founded, and the burden shifts back to the black inheritors of this Du Bois, Woodson, E. Franklin Frazier, and ... group of people to be black for real and to not let down our people. When we do that, then there won't be this distrust.
Man, I'm learning so much from these young whippersnappers up in here. Man, they dropped. This is the best. This is what we talking about. They are exemplifying the very thing we talking about. And I had just written about that Ronald Reagan thing, but not as sharp as you. I'm going to have to rip yours. It'll be in the next book, I'm telling you right now. But, you know, anti-intellectualism, think about the 1963 book, Anti-Intellectualism in America. I'm talking about no Negroes. Richard Hofstadter was talking about the masses of white people who chose Dwight D. Eisenhower over Adlai Stevenson. And then he does a brilliant job of mapping out the anti-intellectualism that Brother Farad brilliantly spoke about. Now, we got our own Afro amnesia and our own Afro, anti-intellectual, of course. Smarty art, what you doing? I remember I was in a preacher's office. I was like 21 years old. I was like, yes, I want to go to Princeton to get a PhD. Ha! Is a PhD going to help you get into heaven? It was a bishop. I promise you. I said, no, but it will let me write my own sermons. Negro. So the thing is, everybody hating on it, but everybody want to call themselves doctor. Nigga, you ain't a doctor. Nigga, you not a doctor, African American. And the bad trend, I ain't gonna name no names, got an honorary degree, now they call themselves doctor. That's why I said, just call me Michael. Because a man came to me in church, he said, my pastor got his PhD in 6 months, it took you 6 years. What's the difference? Now, he's just smarter than me. Now, I want to say, I could have wrote that in 2 days. Ain't got that degree, dog. But I ain't going to say that. But they dogging what they need. But I don't blame black people for that. Because I challenge them where they stand. The reason they salty with some Negro intellectuals, because as Dr. Jones said, a lot of them ain't trying to come with it in defense of these people, so they get mad. Right? Right? You get mad because you said you using that knowledge against me. You using that political power as your senator from South Carolina against me. So I'm thinking, all you Negroes, no, there's a Corey, there was a Kamala, there was a Barack, they're different people. So yes, there is an anti-intellectualism for good reason. Because the intellectualism that they've seen has been destructive. So our job is mission impossible, should you accept this. Right? And we're trying to show people, you ain't got to be sedity to be intelligent. And you see this PhD, it's power to whip, it's power to handle the devil. That's what PhD can mean too. Right? It's power to handle them. And I can handle them. So the point is, yeah, there are some people, but most black people be proud of you. Right? I'll hear by saying this. Dr. King was speaking one day. I believe that God is the God of everybody. Yes. I believe that God is the God of the universe. Yes. And I believe God is the ontological affirmation of a Tulukian construct. Negroes went crazy. Oh my God! And so somebody said, wait a minute, why are you getting all happy? You know you don't know what Dr. King said. He said, yeah, but them white people don't either. Huh? So there is some use for us anyway.
There's a question right here.
Okay. Hi, everybody. God bless everybody. My name is Sister Reverend Word, and I'm a National Action Network lifetime member. This has been an issue that I believe is a true answer, but I haven't heard enough talk about it. So I want to pose this question to y'all. I really believe that Biden, at the stroke of a pen, can really right some of these wrongs regarding voting rights restrictions. But I really don't know that for sure because I really don't understand his delay. So what I'm going to ask y'all, as clear as y'all could possibly make it, does he have the power to really sign into law voting rights acts that will really knock some of what these Republicans are trying to do?
All right, thank you.
And will that be permanent? Once he signs, will they be stopped on that level?
Professor Jones?
That's a quick answer, and it doesn't call for expertise. Absolutely, if the Senate and the House decide on legislation and they send it to him, just like even old man Bush, George H.W. Bush passed the Civil Rights Act in 1991 because the Supreme Court kept paring down the interpretations of the Civil Rights Act of '64. So the answer is a resounding yes. He just has to get it from the Senate and the House. Whatever it is, he can do it. If it goes to him, he can do it. It's constitutional, and that's all.
Just listen, please.
And that's the answer.
All right. Yes, sir.
I'm Reverend Bernard White. I grew up in northern Louisiana, segregated northern Louisiana. I drank out of black water fountains, whereas there was a white one next to it. I went to segregated schools. My class was, I had to read out of secondhand books. But my mother was not formally educated. She made sure that she made education a priority in our home. And my question is that I see four individuals.
Like mozzarella, if you ain't hitting notes, then it's fuck your acapella. Be aiming for the stars like I'm working for Umbrella. I'm leaving bitches dry like the desert in Sahara. Ain't part of terror squad, but I'll terror your squad. And honestly, I see slugs, fam, heteropod. Did you really think that you could make me run full? Welcome to my class, got a lot to learn, school. I am what it is, what it is, what it do. I am on top of this shit. Did you really think that you could make me run full? Welcome to my class, got a lot to learn, school. I am what it is, what it is, what it do. I am on top of this shit. Did you really think that you could make me run full? Welcome to my class, got a lot to learn, school. I am what it is, what it is, what it do. I am on top of this shit. Did you really think that you could make me run full? Welcome to my class, got a lot to learn, school. I am what it is, what it is, what it do. I am on top of this shit.